It's
in
paraffin
Numbers.
wax? Liquid paraffin?
I could smell it and things. I know that would bother her.
And if we look at our chart, all this happens shortly after they leave Egypt. Moses has set up the tabernacle, and now it's time to dedicate the tabernacle.
Now, in Leviticus, the priests were consecrated, and now it's time for the physical parts to be
Right.
dedicated or consecrated.
Yeah, and what a lot of commentary suggests is that a lot of the Torah was kind of happening at the same time. We could, because we see parts of Leviticus in here, and Gary brings up a good point. We can't expect that any long time occurred from the ordination of the priests to the offerings of the tabernacle, because things had to start progressing. They had to start worshiping God. So it might have been shortly after the two brothers were killed. Maybe it happened before the two brothers were killed, because before they could do their work, the tabernacle had to have been consecrated.
Yeah.
Otherwise, there wouldn't be anything to do. So we have to be careful and remember that the Bible isn't given to us in chronological order. There's a book out there called The Story, where
Yeah.
it does give you the Bible in chronological order. You can buy Bibles that are in chronological order. I prefer to read it as it's given to us. It was decided quite a long time ago what books should be in the Bible and how it should be laid out. If we were to look at Torah compared to our Bible, our Christian Bibles, they would be in a different order too.
Yeah.
So everything is slightly different, but the important stuff is still here.
And I've done the story as a study group before. There really was very little difference.
Right.
Hardly noticed a change.
And
so.
there is no difference.
No.
Except the story is in chronological order, and this is in what's called canonical order, according to the canon.
Canonical. Okay.
Well, if it were in order, then Job would be the first book of the Bible. Because Job was written first. If they were written according to publication, Job would be first.
It wasn't.
No, it wasn't.
No, not in the story.
And Esther would be that, well, it's not in chronological, in order of how they were written.
Oh.
Job was written first.
Well,
Of all the
it
books.
might have been written first, but it didn't occur first because we know Moses
Yeah,
put down Torah.
yeah.
So, and when it was put down, it was an oral history.
Yeah.
It was all repeated, because who knew how to read? 1 million slaves? Well, I don't think so. So just remember that the Bible's not in chronological order and things could be happening at the same time.
So we're on 7, right?
We're on 7. So
So-
this chapter, chapter 7, highlights the tabernacle's central role among the tribes of Israel. Not only is it central in the camp, but it's central to their life. It controls their entire life. And just as Christian churches have an order of worship, like we have in our bulletin, chapters 7 and 8 describe the order of worship in the tabernacle. The sin offering purified the sanctuary, making it ready for worship. The burnt offering was an invocation to God, signaling God's readiness to respond to the worshipers. The offering of well-being is at the close in a meal shared by the priests and the worshipers. And the animal sacrifice that occurred, of course, was replaced by Jesus' sacrifice. So when you look at our order of worship, think of it in a different way now. How it gets us ready for God. God is ready to listen to us, and once a month we actually share the meal together, and remembering what Jesus did for us. 2, then the leaders of Israel, they made their offerings. And none of the offerings were mandated by God, because he wanted them to be freely given. God didn't say that you have to give me offerings at this time for the tabernacle. Of course, God did lay out sin offerings and burnt offerings that we had to do, but he didn't say you had to give me things for the tabernacle. Let's see here. Oh, to Gary's point in footnote number 3, some theologians contend that Numbers chapter 7, verse 1, the tabernacle occurred after its construction in Exodus, and chapter 7 occurred on the same day. So that kind of puts it in sync. When Moses finished setting up the tabernacle in 7:1, other theologians say that the Hebrew word for on the day can be translated as when. And that seems more likely due to all the things that occurred after Exodus 40 consecration, such as the ordination of Aaron and his sons in Leviticus 8, and the sin and subsequent death of Nadab and Abihu in Leviticus 10. So that footnote kind of wraps it up, kind of brings it all together. Okay, what else do we have here? Then in verse 6, starting in verse 6, we get to the distribution of the carts. And the carts, of course, were required to haul the stuff. When the tabernacle was broken down, when God said, it's time to move on, they had to break it down, and they had to put them in ox carts. And the Merarites got more carts and more oxen because they had to carry the heavy stuff. They had to carry the posts and all the wooden things. Okay, what do we have here? We just get into the weight of the silver shekels.
So one tribe didn't get any carts because of, or the Levites, because they had to carry everything by hand.
They had to carry the stuff that went in the.
Probably, yeah,
The
the,
pure
Because
sites,
they had poles on them.
yeah.
because they had the sacred things that had the posts, like Wilma said, they had the poles on them. Good point, Gary. I missed that when I read it the first time. It makes you think that God probably thought that the humans should carry the most sacred things
Mhm.
and not be put just on a cart and hauled away. Good point.
That's a very valid point. I like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, David forgot all about that. Put the ark in a cart.
Ark in the cart? Sounds like a children's book.
I'm sure they have a book.
Ark in the Cart,
The Ark
yeah.
in the Cart.
That's-
Yeah, and we all know what happens when people forgot the sanctuary, the tabernacle practices and the order. Okay, what else is interesting? And chapter 7 is kind of dry because it goes through all the offerings.
But it goes day by day. I mean,
Well, and leader by leader.
right?
So very orderly as God would have everything.
I thought they had to be wealthy
Well, and
to
The Egyptians
have
gave them all that
all
stuff.
those offerings.
All the tribes gave the same thing, didn't they?
Yes.
Yeah.
And not all the tribes were as wealthy. Judah was probably the biggest and richest, supposedly.
yep.
Were they ranked by position? Because all of them were put around the tabernacle, and Judah was the first, weren't they,
Uh-huh.
from the east?
And we know that everything that they had, like Wilma said, was given to them by the Egyptians, and God told the Egyptians to give them everything, just to get rid of them. So once again, all they're doing is giving back to God.
They had an awful lot.
So
The
tribes
Egyptians
didn't-
really want to get rid of them.
Yeah.
So the tribes didn't squander the stuff.
No.
They
no.
kept it.
They kept it, as good stewards do. They kept it,
Mhm.
good care of it, to give it back to God.
I like the tribe of Ephraim. We've been through Ephraim so many times. We
Oh.
lived up in Wisconsin.
Yeah.
It's in Door
Oh.
County.
Oh,
And it, about 4 years ago, it just became a wet county. It was always dry. Or
Which
the
means now
town.
they can serve booze.
Right.
And in Wisconsin, that's a big thing.
It was the
Oh.
cutest little ice cream parlor there. That's it. Ephraim.
Yeah, red and white stripes.
Mm-hmm.
Now they're just like every other town in Wisconsin,
Brats, beer. Mhm.
brats and beer.
But Ephraim,
Was there a special day this started on, like a certain day of the
Well-
month?
Well, it must have, because it ends on Passover, doesn't it? He says celebrate Passover. So has it been a whole year? Because they had Passover before they left Israel.
So this is the second Passover.
Right.
So let's see if we have it on our chart.
Yeah, they had Passover, then they left, and then I thought at the end of one of the chapters
So
you're supposed to
the temple
celebrate.
was constructed on the first day of the first month of the second year in Exodus 35:1. Then in Leviticus, chapter 1, verse 2, we have the sacrifices. We have Aaron and his sons, clean and unclean animals, holy days, jubilee, journey prep, various laws, supplementary Passover. Okay, so the second
Oh,
Passover
supplementary.
is in Numbers 9 and 10, when we look at our chart. So they're in their second year after they left Egypt. So Gary, I would think probably, we had to look, okay, so we know it's before the second month of the second year. Because on our chart, that's when they journey to Paran.
Mhm.
So we know they're still in the first month of the second year.
So is that like a January, or they're on a
Well, they
different?
renamed all the months, didn't they?
Right.
Okay.
So we'd have to go back and.
Too much work.
plot it
Okay, never mind. That's nice. They had
out. See, if
a,
Sue were here, she would have done that.
yeah. Kind of miss her at Bible studies.
Yes. Yeah.
Didn't they start their year in October?
That
Wasn't
I-
October,
I don't know.
the end of October was the beginning of their year.
Nissan,
Well, now their
Yeah.
Passover is along the lines of Easter in the spring, usually, isn't it?
Yeah.
Did they
Okay.
move it,
So,
or just?
No, they wouldn't have changed it because that's tied to the phases of the moon.
Okay, so,
and Passover is also Yom Kippur.
no, that's in September. That's in the fall. Because I remember Joe had just started school when he had Yom Kippur off. I'm like, you what? It was trying to be equal with we had a large Jewish population, so. If you get Good Friday off, we get Yom Kippur off.
It's only fair.
Yeah, that's,
And Rosh Hashanah is now, or was, or that's the 8 days.
Kind of wonder if the Levites counted everything that came through on the days to make sure they didn't get shorted.
I think they
I'm sure
did.
They did. I'm sure
I
they
would've.
did.
Your shekel
Sorry.
off.
Because we always need to remember what happens when you don't follow directions.
Don't want to cheat God.
Yep.
Struck down in axe.
Mhm.
Yeah, we'll have to see what month it was. But like Christy said, Passover is in the springtime because that doesn't change. And that's why our resurrection is tied to there.
This is the one who offered his offering on the first day. Oh, no, that's a person's name, not a month's name. I wasn't looking at that.
Okay.
That's a pretty long chapter, 89 verses.
It's the, I think it's
Second
the long-
longest.
Second longest?
Second longest in the
Yeah.
Bible.
Yeah, Jim goes, man, this is long.
That's what I thought.
I like the last verse.
But then the rest go like this, so it's
Yeah.
just that, got a little lengthy there.
When Moses entered the tent of meetings to speak with the Lord, he heard the voice speaking to him between the two cherubims above the atonement cover of the ark of the covenant. In
And
this way, the Lord spoke to him. He could hear it.
Yep. From the mercy seat.
it took him 12 days to do the entire dedication offering. It took him 12 days to do it all. Because each of them had their own day.
and that was a lot to do in one day. but-
That was a lot to do in one day.
Yeah.
And then it gives you the totals from 84 on. It gives you the totals of all the animals that they sacrificed. And dedication, the word dedication is Hanukkah.
Yeah.
Hanukkah.
Yeah.
That's where I got mixed up.
Really?
Yeah, Hanukkah means dedication. So when it talks about the Feast of Dedication in John 10:22, it talks about at the time of the Feast of Dedication, That was that's Hanukkah. And, it's called the Festival of Lights, but it's actually the Feast of Dedication.
Oh, so, that's
Kinda
right.
It's like the commemoration of the second, or the second temple, when the Maccabean defeated the Greeks and kicked them out of Jerusalem. And then they rededicated the temple, and that's where you get the Feast of Hanukkah. But this was the actual first Hanukkah in the Bible.
Yeah, 'cause you're right, Hanukkah's the one around Christmas.
Right.
Yes.
The
Okay.
Days of Light? Just a-
Very short, I looked it up on the calendar, it's right, I can't remember, it's right around now.
And you get
It's
a
before
gift every,
Christmas.
I remember my girlfriend,
12 days.
yeah.
It can sometimes be on, even on
Yeah.
Christmas, once in a while it coincides.
Yeah.
Yeah, they celebrated Christmas and Hanukkah, so it was like, woo.
It starts today and it ends on the 30th.
Oh,
It
okay.
starts on the 22nd and ends on the 30th.
And they get a gift. Light a candle, get a gift every night. That was on Arthur too. My kids love to watch that one.
Yeah.
The second to last sentence is always kind of interesting. It's all fellowship offerings,
Yeah.
not burnt offerings, each and every time. And a lot of slaughter going on.
Uh-huh.
And then some up there for a burnt offering.
Maybe they weren't set up for the burnt offering yet?
No, everything
Yeah.
was set up.
Okay.
So a burnt offering, and then a sin offering, and a fellowship offering. So everything that was set out in Leviticus is being done again.
Yeah, so this was a lot of work every day. They had the sacrifice, they had the cleanup. Incredible.
Get it right after 12 days. Repetition.
About time. And then setting up the lamps. The Lord said to Moses, speak in chapter 8, "Speak to Aaron and say to him, when you set up the lamps, see that all 7 light up the area in front of the lampstand." So that the lamps not only lit up the work area of the priests, but they also represented God. Just like Jesus tells us he's the light of the world. So these lampstands were the light of the world to the Jews. In verses 1 through 4 gives the first and third commands of the menorah. Verse 4 references the first command about how the menorah was to be constructed, with the hammered out of gold and with the flowerets and the 12 lamps. And then the second command, you don't hear these verses until Exodus 27:20, "Command the Israelites to bring you clear oil of pressed olives for the light, so that the lamps may be kept burning." And this is to tell us that the laity had a part in the worship also. They were the ones to bring the oil. It wasn't just the priests. And in Leviticus 24, that's it, Leviticus 24. So, in verse 4, it tells us how it was made, of hammered gold from its base of the blossoms. And we know the lampstand was made just like God told Moses to. And setting apart of the Levites. This is where all the Levites were purified and dedicated. And this is where we can reference that other article about the difference between Levitical and Aaronite priests, to tell us the difference, and how there's only the priests and the high priest that come from Aaron's family, and then the rest of the Levites do the other stuff. That was to answer your question from last week about how many of these priests could enter into the sanctuary, how many ephahs did they have, and they really only had one because they only had one high priest.
Yeah, there's one.
And that article breaks it down. So here we get that the Levites, outside of Aaron's family, aren't ordained, they're just purified and dedicated for the work.